Precisely!
How could things get any worse? Well, at least to maintain my dignity. This channel for any significant period of time, you might be familiar with my hatred of this game. So, why do I hold Silent Hill Homecoming with such vitriol? Well, I think it's worth taking a look back in time. Around 2009, I basically hunted down every Silent Hill game I could get my hands on, and once I had all the Team Silent games under my belt, I craved more. The first one I got was Silent Hill Origins, which at the time I thought was okay by PSP standards, but that was just an appetizer. I needed something more substantial. Something next-gen, a game that would take everything from the previous games and take it to the next level. And after hearing that the at-the-time latest Silent Hill game was recently released the very year I got into the series, I was hyped as hell for it. To give context here, I went in pretty much blind save for what I saw on the box art and back cover, and what I saw of Silent Hill Homecoming left my jaw to the floor. The game was exactly what I was looking for, and the premise of playing as a soldier in Silent Hill was interesting to me as somebody who was learning about World War II history and researching stuff like PTSD and horrific war experiments in my spare time. I have issues. Once I started playing the game, however, any and all love will be short-lived because I felt like I'd been betrayed by this game as it completely fucked up everything that made the Team Silent games good in my eyes. The overt focus on combat, the atmosphere itself being borrowed from the 2006 movie more than the earlier games, and like a great many Silent Hill fans, I subscribe to the belief that this game sucked because it was made by those evil, filthy, fucking Americans. And none other was my enemy than the evil Tom Hewlett. The point is, this was the first huge whoopsie-daisies that the series ever committed. Not only having it taken away from Team Silent, but it made me very worried for the series' future. But that was over 10 years ago, and after taking a look at the development history, things start to make a little more sense. Back around 2004, Team Silent announced that they were working on Silent Hill 5 for the next generation of consoles, with Masashi Sugiyama heading up the project as chief designer. Very little was known about what the Team Silent version of the game was going to be like, with only Akira Yamaoka's hints of a return to Silent Hill 2's psychological tone, and a concept revolving around fear in the daylight. Concept where the world would decay and shift around the player's eyes, and from the sounds of things, it sounds like a more active otherworld populated with other people, perhaps kind of akin to a more subdued version of Limbo from DMC Devil May Cry. As time passed us by, however, no new information was found out about the game, and circa 2007, Team Silent was disbanded, and all that was revealed was a teaser trailer for a very different Silent Hill 5, with a vastly different premise for what was initially hinted at.
They say war is hell, but there are worse things. War changes you, and nobody back home could ever understand. They never understood me. They say you can't go home again, but they're wrong. I just don't want to.
It was at this point where Konami spun the wheel of developers and it landed on Double Helix Games, a newly founded studio comprised of members from the Collective and Shiny Entertainment. Developers probably not very world famous these days, but they were responsible for licensed titles such as Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, and one of my personal favourite video games of all time, The Matrix Path of Neo. So these were obviously developers with a bit of experience behind their backs, if a little bit work for hire since they were mostly known for developing movie tie-in games, with the odd IP here and there such as Messiah, Earthworm Jim, and MDK. According to Double Helix artist Kenzie Lamar, the reason for Team Silent's disbanding, at least according to him, was apparently because Konami themselves wanted the series to have, quote-unquote, a different feeling to it. Which is something I do have to call into question, since despite Silent Hill 4's less than stellar reception from fans and critics at the time, it doesn't seem like grounds to completely disband Team Silent, especially when they were on the cusp of making their big comeback for next generation consoles like the PS3 and Xbox 360. Then again, there may have also been some behind the scenes drama at Konami, so we'll probably never truly know the reason why Team Silent disbanded, unless somebody asks Masashi Sugiyama about it.
Speculation aside, Double Helix Games were the ones developing the title, and if I can say anything about Silent Hill Homecoming's failure, it wasn't for lack of trying.
Double Helix Games spent their time researching all that they could about the games and deriving their inspiration from that and the Silent Hill movie. Intent to maintain the storytelling depth and atmosphere the games were famous for, alongside other vestigial improvements like making the gameplay a little bit less clunky than what was seen during the tank controls era. And the team itself was working very cohesively, with writers Patrick Doody and Chris Valenziano working on the game's story, writing the game closely with game designers Jason Allen, Daniel Jacobs, and lead artist Brian Horton to work with a more focused vision that would make Silent Hill Homecoming truly the next-gen evolution that they wanted to create. And with that, all seemed to go reasonably well behind the scenes, up until the game was banned from Australia and Germany for its excessive violence and gore, which resulted in both games having certain scenes censored and resubmitted for approval.
I can't speak for Germany's case, although I do know someone who can if he's willing to chip in the comments section, but for any Australian viewers who were pretty young, this was back during a time when we didn't have an R18+ rating for video games.
And so, with those lofty expectations in mind, on September 30th, 2008, Silent Hill Homecoming was released to mixed to positive reviews at the time. Critics praising it for its presentation, while others criticised the game for its combat focus and story. On the fan side, however, things are a little bit more vitriolic, but some do also err on the positive side. Yes indeedy, to my surprise, there are actually people out there who genuinely do enjoy Silent Hill Homecoming while acknowledging the game's flaws. So I suppose in the interest of trying to be fair and bring balance to the force or whatever, I'll do my best not to try and do the whole internet reviewer thing of, oh man, this game is literally so bad that it makes me want to stick my dick in a chainsaw diatribe that I probably would have done had I reviewed the game back in 2009.
So, keeping things positive for the time being, let's talk technical aspects.
Graphically, Silent Hill Homecoming actually looks pretty snazzy for a 7th gen video game, and even today holds up quite nicely. With the sole exception of some facial animations, particularly that on Alex himself during moments where you take a nice look at his pearly whites and just feel compelled to say, nice teeth. This does affect some other characters' animations to a lesser extent, but it's not quite the 8th generation facial animation jank that we're used to these days, which borders on the uncanny valley at times, like with the Resident Evil 2 remake's hyper-realistic burger-eating animation. Voice performances are all pretty solid, nothing exceptional, but likewise all the actors and actresses are unique and suit their roles quite snazzily. On the topic of sound design, here we have the last vestige of Team Silent's influence on the series with Akira Yamaoka back on sound design and music, which the game does really shine for. The sound design itself being punchy, visceral, and adds a ton of atmosphere with an authentic Silent Hill feel to it that the game definitely would have suffered without. Another minor but very well appreciated detail is the flavor text that Alex has when examining items and points of interest. Given that we're going back to visit his hometown, Alex does give us a keen insight into what life was like growing up in the Shepherd household, as well as living in the town of Shepherd's Glen.
And that's about all my positivity for the technical aspects.
Well, okay, what I'm about to cover isn't terrible, but it is definitely a letdown to say the least. Something you'll quickly come to notice, at least if you've seen the 2006 Silent Hill movie, is that Homecoming borrows heavily from its set design, and bases a lot of the otherworld and monster designs from that film. Particularly when you look at the likes of Pyramid Head, the Crawlers, and Sexy Nurses, because go fucking figure. On the one hand, this is incredibly faithful to the 2006 movie, and if you ever wondered what a Silent Hill movie tie-in game would look like on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, well, look no further.
However, what it has in faithfulness in relating itself to something Silent Hill, it also loses its own unique identity within the series itself.
While I admit, this is only my third and final playthrough of Silent Hill Homecoming, my mind completely drew a blank when it came to this game's otherworld, which is an oddity to say the least, since I can remember almost everything about it from any other game in the series. And what few things Homecoming does have to its name, unfortunately come across as very forgettable, particularly in its monster designs. Don't get it twisted, they look appropriately Silent Hill, but aside from one or two creatures, a lot of them feel more like fan designs of monsters rather than something that has any legitimate symbolism tying into the story itself. A lot of this is also extending to the returning monsters such as the sexy nurses and groaners who feel more like they're included because it's a Silent Hill game rather than having any psychological reason for them being there.
Precisely!
And lastly is the soundtrack, which unfortunately is Akira Yamaoka's most disappointing to date. It's nothing terrible, mind you, but on all fronts from atmospheric to horror to the vocal themes, they're all rather forgettable and feel more like Akira wrote down some notes, recorded the music and waited for his paycheck to clear. The only tracks I honest to god remember are the main menu theme. Which is really only because it's the first thing you hear, but also the vocal track This Sacred Line.
I return to my
I mean, apart from that, it fits the theme, which is okay, but it's not a soundtrack I'm gonna listen to anytime soon.
However, that's just set dressing, and the best part about video games is that the lion's share of the game can more or less be salvaged if the gameplay itself is fun. Unfortunately though, Silent Hill Homecoming isn't one of those games.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves here, let's keep things positive for now. And something I'm actually very happy about when it comes to Homecoming is the puzzles. I'm shocked, but the game actually manages to have a good balance of puzzle challenge without the need for a riddle difficulty. And to that effect, it melds together the best elements of the first 4 games. Some being logic puzzles which require you to rack your brains, while others go for the Silent Hill 4 approach by being more hands-on, if a little bit more fiddly like the slide and wire puzzles. But if there is any genuine props I can give Homecoming for anything really, it'd be that the puzzles made the transition quite nicely. Another positive, even if deeming with faint praise, is how the game makes use of all your weapons beyond combat situations. Using stuff like a steel pipe to pry open gates, or the knife to cut open sheets of skin and plastic, or using an axe to remove wooden bordered areas. It makes for a nice means of accessing areas that Alex otherwise wouldn't be able to, and ensures that you make use of all your weapons in your arsenal, even if they're not your preferred means of combat. If there is any minor check plus I can award the game as well, it would also be that a lot of the subtler touches found in Silent Hill 2 and 3, such as objects being highlighted and Alex's head turning to face points of interest, all remain intact. A detail that Double Helix could have easily forgotten about, but it does show that they were developers who did their homework, and it does pay off quite handsomely. And as for anything else, we do also have a paltry choice system, which affects the game's endings. It's nothing special and is more of an A or B kind of choice system, but regardless, it does give the game a level of replay value by proxy of the multiple ending schema alone. Of course, this does come with a caveat that, unlike Silent Hill 3, Homecoming's endings are, for better or worse, adequately built up, but that's not really saying much when we take the horrendous story into account.
And that about concludes the extent of all the good things I have to say about the gameplay. Oh dear.
Let's get the petty shit out of the way first. The flashlight in this game fucking sucks. Very little is illuminated, and unless you jack the brightness up on your TV to an extreme degree, you ain't seeing shit. And even in that case, what you do see is just a monochromatic mess filtering the uninspired art design. Another petty complaint would be the odd enemy placement. To contextualize my point, nurses in the hotel. Why?
But that's enough beating around the bush, so let's get into the real meat and potatoes.
Control-wise, the game adopts a third-person shooter control scheme where Alex's movement is controlled by the left analog stick, where he can strafe left and right. The movement itself is solid, but it lacks a lot of the fluidity that Silent Hill 4's controls had. Alex can examine items, use objects in similar manner to how they were used in previous games, and insofar as translating the traditional gameplay to a new control scheme, it works about as well as you could be expected when you're just jogging around. That is until we get to the game's combat system.
Before I continue, if you're the kind of person that says that Silent Hill combat is meant to be bad on purpose, you are an idiot, and I hope you get chlorine in your gene pool.
Precisely!
The combat of previous Silent Hill games might seem clunky by today's standards, but circa 1996 to 2005, this was just how survival horror games played. So complaints about Silent Hill Homecoming's combat were made for 2 specific reasons. One, the idea that Alex was a soldier and that because this game came out in a post-Call of Duty 4 world, people immediately thought that this would change the gameplay into an action-packed explosive Resident Evil 5 sort of game. And two, the increased focus on combat would mean that the game was less scary because Alex has fighting experience. Something I immediately call into question because in games like Resident Evil or Fear for example, did STARS being trained police officers mitigate the zombie threat in any way? Was Point Man any more or less prepared for the horrors of Alma Wade because of his military training? Hell, even Max Payne had a better grip on psychological horror, and that game is about as action-packed as you can get.
No, please God, no.
Here's the thing, action games and horror games are all about input and the way they stimulate the player. Action games like Doom, for example, aren't all just run and gun and kill all the demons like a lot of people seem to think they are, but instead they do also have quiet moments where you explore, find hidden rooms, and absorb the game's atmosphere. Horror games in that aspect work similarly, because they don't always force you to run from enemies because otherwise that makes the game tedious due to the player becoming used to the failure penalty of getting caught, and thus the threat has become banal. However, too much ambience and very scalpel-like build-up, it becomes little more than white noise gameplay where you're just walking around listening to creepy sound design. Scalpel horror usually tends to work great for a movie where you have no input and are observing characters from a distance, however in a video game, we do have input. While the protagonists themselves do have their own thoughts and feelings in-universe, we're the ones in the driver's seat and we need to experience what they do. And a repetitive gameplay loop is only going to further spiral the player into apathy once we start seeing it less as an immersive experience and more video game player doing video game things.
Precisely!
To this effect, Team Silent was smart in balancing all three of these game modes onto a formula that they had 3 years to witness before Silent Hill 1 hit store shelves. The combat, puzzles, and atmosphere all worked in a balancing act, some games indulging in it more than others, but on the whole, everything functioned as intended. And let me just say, Double Helix Games weren't a company of inept developers, despite what I'm about to counterintuitively say about them. They did their homework and adapted the gameplay about as well as they possibly could while working with a new control scheme. Not to mention their forebearers, both Shiny Entertainment and the Collective, did have experience with combat-heavy games before. The Matrix Path of Neo being an excellent example of this, where the controls, while a bit unusual given this era of Devil May Cry and God of War clones, function very fluidly. And with a solid mix of moves at your disposal, it made the game instantly replayable on just how responsive and intuitive the controls were.
And so, what is my problem with Silent Hill Homecoming's combat? That it fucking sucks!
I feel like it's this criticism in particular that was part of why Silent Hill Homecoming's design feels like it was half-competent and, well, half-arsed. To describe how the combat flows and functions, for those of you not in the know, Alex enters into this virtual-style beat-em-up mode, where he and the enemy engage into a basic 3-hit combo structure with a simplistic dodge mechanic. Many of the weapons feel clunky to use, and I'd suggest avoiding guns at all possible given how sluggish they feel to utilize. Something especially shameful given how games like Gears of War and Uncharted Drake's Fortune had released a few years prior, under very similar gameplay techniques that worked much more fluidly than what Homecoming has to offer. And as for melee weapons, your best bet is to use your basic knife you get right at the beginning of the game, due to its rapid stun lock combo, as many other weapons leave Alex open regardless of whether or not you use the light or heavy attacks. And while the knife might make some combat situations easier, it's not something that breaks the game to any significant degree, since if you let your guard down, you'll spend half the game being handed to you an ass buffet. Yes indeedy, in Shepherd's Glen, monsters stun lock you! Especially with the fucking hammerhead enemies and whatever the hell these things are. They'll end up pissing you off in a slightly less bullshitty way than the Slurpers in Silent Hill 3, but great Cliff Burton's Ghost, they are trying their damnedest to make up for that fact.
Precisely!
This design practice also extends to the game's boss fights, all of them being dealt with in a very similar manner, with the added stipulation of a QuickTime event, because as we all know, in 2008, QuickTime events were the bee's knees. Yeah, thanks a fucking bunch, Resident Evil 4. I will concede that the bosses do have a slightly more aggressive second phase for what it's worth, but it doesn't really change the dynamic in any meaningful way, so they might as well have not have even fucking bothered. This could have been mitigated had encounters been similar to previous games where you could feasibly speed by the monsters and try your hand at evading them until you reach your destination. However, due to the game's enclosed design and how combat mode and exploration mode are given two distinguished control schemes, so to speak, 9 times out of 10 you'll be knocked flat on your ass because you're busy fighting enemies. And of course, naturally for a game series that prided itself on psychological terror, we now have arena combat sections. Honestly, I don't know what to say. They're about as video game as you'd expect and add absolutely nothing to the game whatsoever but pad it out for time in a game that's already padding out its areas, such as the sewer level. Woo fucking who. As for the levels themselves, the game itself follows a linear structure akin to Silent Hill 3, where you go from one location to another, with the occasional revisit and the other world transformation, which holds little to be desired due to the game's uninspired aesthetics, and moments that are used to surprise the player. To give an example from previous games, exploring around to find items and key objects only to come across the mirror room trapping you in Silent Hill 3, or in Silent Hill 1's case, the school library, where dissonant knocks will keep you on the edge of your seat. In Silent Hill Homecoming's case, besides the hospital sequence at the beginning of the game, there's none of this to be found, and exploring remains solidly tedious. Doubly so by the time they introduce the cult members as enemies in this game. And if I can be completely honest with you here, not only do they look like they were ripped right out of the Futurama video game, but ironically they were scarier there than they were in Homecoming.
To put it bluntly, it doesn't exactly strike fear into the hearts of men and women when their primary introduction is this.
Shepard. I'm gonna kill you. You can't be here. You're mine.
Great enemy choice, guys. But overall, what is there to really say about the gameplay?
Well, the game nails puzzles, but it needed a lot more refinement to the combat in order to better translate the effect that Double Helix wanted to go for. Because between the exploration being dull and the game's overall design feeling very patchwork, I get a mixture of first game syndrome and the idea that this is more like a kid copying their friend's homework. First game syndrome and how they try to apply old formulas to a new look and have a lot of flaws to iron out in the overall gameplay, but also a lack of creativity in the sense that they try and stick closely to the Team Silent formulas, but they did so little to innovate the series in a way that Silent Hill 4 tried to do.
I suppose a good turn of phrase would be ambition versus consistency.
Precisely!
Given Silent Hill 4's shaky reception at the time and Origins not really doing much to impress anybody, I think trying to play it safe does make sense and, you know, to try and derive influence from a formula that worked in the past, while trying to update it to modern standards, it might seem like the right move. However, this above all else was something that not only needed to be done right the first time around, but also needed to surpass its predecessors if Silent Hill was going to have a future as a franchise.
But you know what, in spite of everything I've said thus far, the absolute crowning downfall of Silent Hill Homecoming is its abysmal story. Let's get into this.
So the plot kicks off in 2007, I guess, where soldier Alex Shepard, no relation to Mary as far as I know, is being dragged through the hospital in a Jacob's Ladder-inspired gurney sequence where, if I can be positive for a moment, it actually starts the game on a pretty good note. And that feeling is felt all throughout the hospital segment as the atmosphere is tense, the player is right there with Alex in a confused state of mind, and we're left alone in this dilapidated place, left to wander the empty halls knowing that danger is lurking around every corner. And with creepy sound effects like the distant infant cries among a plethora of hints about the events yet to come, I've got to give Double Helix my props here. They made one hell of a good first impression. In due time, Alex soon comes across his younger brother Joshua, who, like all generic horror children, is completely unaware of the horror surrounding him, and much like a girl with short, black hair, just turned 7 last month. My daughter. Josh makes a run for it, causing Alex to pursue. Unfortunately, good tidings start to fade, as just as quickly as Alex picks up a weapon, we're then treated to the Silent Hill movies otherworld, and a sexy nurse because go fucking figure. Jumping the gun a little bit here, Alex's main goal throughout the whole game is to find his brother Joshua. Now, in a similar vein to Cheryl Mason, you might think that the game would try to endear you to the character in a way that would kick in your older brother instincts to make sure that...
I'm busy. Go away.
What are you doing here?
I want my toy. Find Robbie. I want my toy.
I haven't seen any toys around here.
Guess you're not my friend.
And I want to strangle this little bastard right now!
If our primary goal is trying to find and save the life of this bratty little kid, then what interest do I really have in Alex's struggles? I know we're only 5 minutes in at this point, but there's a huge difference between creating tonal dissonance for the sake of horror, and creating an unlikable character who we reluctantly have to search for, and unfortunately, Josh is the latter in this case. You might bring up Laura as an example of a bratty little kid done right in Silent Hill 2, but the reason why she worked is usually because she tended to go away when the horror needed to kick into gear. Compare that to Joshua, since he's so intertwined with Alex's motivation, he's given a level of focus in the plot that, combined with his unlikable brattiness, killed the atmosphere sight unseen.
And killing the atmosphere right at the beginning of the game is a major faux pas for any horror title.
After retrieving the kid's plushie, Josh runs away again, as he is of wont to do, and Alex starts giving chase leading into the elevator where... Oh man, it was a dream. So now that we're back in the real world, well, relatively speaking, Alex hitches a ride with one Travis O'Grady, returning to his hometown of Shepherd's Glen, where the town in question looks very, Silent Hill. Like, as in exactly like Silent Hill, completely abandoned, foreboding figures speaking in riddles, as Alex meets Judge Holloway, a close associate of the Shepard family.
Well, I hope you get a chance to catch up with Elle. I'm sure she'd love to see you.
She's still here?
Of course. You know how it is. No one ever leaves this place.
Come and stay with us, Alex. Forever and ever and ever and ever. Making his way back home, Alex finds his house just as abandoned as the rest of the town. However, we do see a flashback of Alex being a sweet older brother as he hands Josh a flashlight after he has a nightmare. Not that it redeems the character to any significant degree, but hey, I gotta give the game props where I can. Heading back downstairs, Alex finds his mother Lillian staring out the window with a vacant look in her eyes, barely giving her older son the time of day, and only speaking in riddles about how Josh has apparently disappeared, with her husband Adam Shepard going out to look for him. Noticing his mother isn't exactly of sound mind and holding a revolver, he takes the gun away from her lap, and after hearing an innocuous noise in the basement, Alex is sent to investigate. Shock of all shocks, he finds a monster called the Scraper down there, and after dealing with the fucking thing, Alex heads back out onto the streets to find Elle, his childhood friend, who's pinning up missing posters on the lookout for the town's citizens who've gone missing in the years since Alex has been away. Elle's sister Nora being one of the many lost along with them.
So at this point of the story, it's basically things we've come to expect. Things have gone awry, townspeople are creepy as hell, we've got some investigating to do. However, this time around, things just feel off-putting, and not in the way that you might think.
I don't know how to say it, but after the ripper that was the hospital sequence, the early parts of the game just feel dull rather than inviting as far as the mystery is concerned. I guess part of my apathy stems from the fact that the game has a little too much on its shoulders as far as the setup is concerned. It's got to introduce a new town, its history, the surrounding background regarding its forefathers, the new characters, its connection to Silent Hill itself, and on top of all of that, try in vain to develop people like Alex, Elle, and Deputy Wheeler, whilst also keeping the focus away from the villains, but also keeping them relatively in focus in the meantime. What we have here is a heavy load that needs to get out all its information out at once, but likewise also feels the need to keep certain things hidden, and while in-game memos and subtle clues do their best to alleviate that struggle, it's not quite enough. This wasn't exactly a problem for the previous games, as those were working with a more limited cast, and on top of that were very goal-oriented, so the focus was almost always on finding Cheryl, finding Mary, Heather discovering her past, Henry trying to get out of his apartment, etc. There were very basic premises that could be summed up in 5 words or less, with background material there to strengthen the primary goal. Homecoming by comparison lays out too much too quickly, and all of the information is laid out so thick and fast that we as the player already get the gist of what's going on. So all the horror tension is killed knowing that it's not so much a matter of what's going to happen, but rather when it's going to happen. Now, that's not to say what Silent Hill Homecoming tries to do couldn't work, or at least under the right circumstances, but this would have required Shepard's Glen to have been set up as part of a previous game, so that Double Helix could have used the world building they set up in that hypothetical previous game to already deal with the established context and build upon it, much like what Silent Hill 2 did to Silent Hill 1, and then Silent Hill 3 did to 2, so on and so forth, as sequels are of wont to do. Anyway, back to the plot at hand. As Alex continues to explore the town, he finds himself inside the Bartlett Mausoleum, where after solving a puzzle, he opens up a child's grave and uncovers a broken wristwatch with the words inscribed, "Forgive me." Of course, after finding something incriminating, he passes out and awakens in Silent Hill, wandering the streets aimlessly, where he finds Josh running away inside a dilapidated motel. Just like the Silent Hill movie. However, to give the devil its due, this is also another moment where the game provides one of the more somber moments of psychological horror, where Alex meets a mysterious woman stuck in the hotel. She's been there for so long that she can't even remember her name, and asks Alex if he can help her retrieve some of her mementos for her, so she can finally be at peace.
So difficult to remember. The warm sunlight dancing on the water. The smell of cotton candy in the air. And the sound of wind blowing through the trees. Find them for me, and I'll give you what you need.
We never truly see who this woman is, but her backstory is all there in the memos, where we get some vague implications that because of the stress she felt caring for her lover's illness, she cheated on him with Mayor Bartlett, who was far more sinister than she could have ever known. It's eerie, tragic, but also kept very low-key, which is absolutely fantastic, and nails the feel of a Silent Hill game. While some might draw comparisons to the Born from a Wish expansion pack of Silent Hill 2, it is distinctive enough to stand up on its own 2 feet, and had the game done more of this, and less of the overt
"Something is definitely wrong here,"
then I think I'd be talking about a very different Silent Hill Homecoming here, but sadly, this isn't the world we live in.
You have a kind voice.
And of course, to immediately shoot that goodwill down in flames, here's where we see a familiar face.
Now, Pyramid Head's inclusion has been to the ire of many fans since the game's release, and to a certain extent, I can see where they're coming from.
I mean, he shows up looking menacing in an obvious fan service moment, and then turns to look at Alex going, "Hey, how you doing? Pyramid Head, down executioner," and then just walks away without doing anything, really. Forgetting that the reason why Pyramid Head worked in Silent Hill 2 was because when we see him for the first time, we witness his handiwork by killing the dude watching TV, then we see him having some sexy time with mannequins, and the third time, we get him for a boss fight. All done in the first sequence of the game, so it at least sets up the threat, but the important thing is, he has agency in that game, whereas here, he just shows up like your drunken uncle in a Halloween costume scaring the kids.
That being said though, Pyramid Head's inclusion from a symbolism standpoint does make sense.
Unlike most, I'm not against Pyramid Head being in Silent Hill Homecoming because regardless of what fans will tell you, no, he's not just reflective of James Sunderland, he's reflective of the town's executioners.
And given Adam and Lillian's lovely treatment of Alex...
Dad! What the hell are you doing? You know this place is off limits. I don't ever want to see you in here again. Are we clear?
I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Yeah, they'll be fine.
Alex finds Josh again, and because Josh is a little shithead, he lets Alex fall down the hole and injure his back.
Why we want to find this little crotch goblin, let alone ensure his safety, is a mystery to me.
And if that wasn't bad enough, Alex soon finds himself back in the other world again for his troubles.
Thanks, Josh!
Precisely!
It isn't too long before Alex finds Mayor Bartlett completely drunk off his ass and disregarding the townsfolk, claiming that they can't stop what has already begun. Empty platitudes aside, his thoughts turn to his son Joey, who was friends with Josh, speaking about him with a certain degree of melancholy.
And if the broken watch in Alex's possession was anything to go by, then I think we all know where this is headed.
And I mean that with the utmost sincerity, because holy fucking shit, the foreshadowing here is fucking horrible. Bartlett tells Alex to fuck off, but as soon as he shows the watch, he says that Alex shouldn't have come back and that something has come to take the townspeople of Shepherd's Glen away. Still, could be worse.
Please protect me in this moment!
After winning the boss fight, the creature tries to give Alex one final high five and he faints, falling down a pit where presumably he will pass by Darth Maul on the way down, awakening in a prison cell where Alex soon meets up with Deputy Wheeler, who interrogates him about what happened to Mayor Bartlett, both quickly coming to the obvious that Wheeler's seen the monsters roaming around town and deciding to team up with Alex. On the way out, Wheeler advises Alex to go out in search of Dr. Fitch, expositing that he and most of the descendants of the town's founders are tied into what's going on here. Recovering his gear and fighting their way out of the police station in a manner that's less horror movie and more an action-packed thriller, complete with a...
I'll cover you.
And I mean, I brought it up before in the technical aspects, but it feels like this part of the game and earlier parts were written by two completely different writers. All that aside, Alex makes it outside to find Elle in the parking lot, under attack by what looks like what had happened if a closer and a slurper did the fusion dance. And once again, I have to point out my horror philosophy because this is pure sledgehammer right here.
I don't want to judge the game for what it isn't, but scenes like this genuinely make me wonder what the writing process for this game was like, since at least the earlier parts of the game were somewhat able to nail the feeling of Silent Hill.
But scenes like this feel like they were written for a completely different action horror game. Getting cut off from Deputy Wheeler by the monsters, Alex and Elle take to the sewers, and in a moment of respite, Elle starts giving up hope that they'll ever find the people of Shepherd's Glen. Alex, ever the chipper dude, gives her a pep talk and the two make their way forward until they're separated by a gate, and after a bullshit arena combat section, Elle has gone missing, prompting both Wheeler and Alex to meet up at Dr. Fitch's office to find her. On his way there, however, Alex runs into the man himself, completely psychotic and holding a scalpel. Giving chase, Alex earns more than he bargains for as he wins an all-expense-paid trip to the other world in what is admittedly a pretty cool transition sequence.
Creepy. Ugh.
You See Silent Hill Homecoming? That's how you do it. More of that.
Precisely!
And after a lovely stroll through the set dressing of the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, Alex finds Dr. Fitch who explains that he has come down here so he can be with his lost daughter, often bringing her dolls as presents. Of course, upon giving Fitch the doll that Alex found earlier, this causes our next boss to appear and kill her dear departed father, leaving it up to Alex to defeat her, dropping a key upon her death. Awakening back to reality, Alex...
Thank you for that.
Anyway, he finds a key that was meant for the founders of the town located in City Hall, giving him his next destination.
It's clear at this point that the kids of the town founders are returning to enact vengeance with their parents feeling sorrow and regret for their actions, but the way in which it's presented here just feels... boring.
I will admit, had Dr. Fitch's segment been first before Mayor Bartlett's, I might be singing a different tune here due to the atmosphere of the Otherworld and how low-key its presentation was, but if there's anything that this recent and final playthrough of Silent Hill Homecoming has shown me, it's that it's got a serious problem in how to properly disperse information to the player without it being painfully obvious. I mean, if you'll pardon the vulgar metaphor, the game blows its load too early and what mystery is left just feels dull and uninspired. Opening the way to the underground, Alex descends to find ancient texts pertaining to God, and upon further exploration, Alex also finds the Halo of the Sun sealing away an ancient dagger, which our Soldier Boy seems to recognize as one and the same, which used to be his door handle? Well, I mean, I say this, but the dagger does make for a good door handle as it opens a secret passage beneath the town, leading out where Alex heads for home. With a bit of searching through his humble abode up in the attic, we get a flashback between Adam and Josh where Adam imparts the symbol of the Shepherd family with a ring necklace with strict orders that Josh never show it to Alex. Inside Adam's study, we find a letter that because of his fuck-up, the spiritual powers of Silent Hill are affecting the town of Shepherd's Glen. And on top of that, the cult has returned to kidnap its citizens and brainwash them in an effort to increase their numbers after the damage that was dealt to them by Heather in Silent Hill 3. Adam stating that he went to Silent Hill in order to deal with the threat.
And here's where the plot begins to self-destruct.
Before Alex has a chance to ask Lillian about Silent Hill, she's attacked by the cult from the Silent Hill movie and taken away, right before the Shepherd House takes lockdown measures to a rather extreme degree by shifting to the Otherworld. One puzzle section later, Alex escapes from the Otherworld to meet Elle on the other side, convincing her and Deputy Wheeler to go to Silent Hill where they'll find the answers they're looking for. And on this lovely boat ride, we get one thing we seldom ever see in Silent Hill Homecoming, an actual moment where our characters can have a moment to relax and play off each other.
I'm serious, if there's one thing that Homecoming really misses the mark on in terms of anything, it's the small character moments.
This is the one and only time in the game where we ever really get to see a moment of our characters interacting with each other. Elle speaking fondly about missing Alex when he was off at war, and Alex himself apologizing for not being there when she needed him most. It's all pretty decent stuff, especially cute moments like this.
Took her from my mother's room the morning Laura disappeared. I haven't taken it off since.
Wow. Look at that hair.
Shut up. Jerk.
A playful moment of innocence between characters who, up until now, are at least decently likable, and had a few more moments like this been peppered throughout the plot, it would have greatly helped generate some investment into a story that's desperately in need of engagement. Sadly, however, the plot rears its ugly head back into the fray, Elle gets kidnapped by the cult, and Alex is tossed overboard, washing up on the shores of Silent Hill. A town very desolate and filled to the brim with ash, just like the Silent Hill movie. Getting a radio communication from Wheeler, he and Elle are alright, albeit taken prisoner in the Overlook Penitentiary. Once inside, Alex rescues Wheeler and heads towards solitary confinement where Elle is being held. On his way there, however, Alex is confronted by his mother, bound to a torture device where you can practically hear Jigsaw's distorted voice in the background.
Your father and I, we loved you so much. But they said we could only choose one. Ah! It hurts so much. Make it stop.
I'm thinking, no.
The music tries to play it up as a sad moment, but maternal connection notwithstanding, why should I care what happens to Lillian? More to the point, why should Alex care since she treated him like fucking dog shit?
And if you think this plot point is infuriating now, just you wait.
And as if to add insult to injury, Lillian's death causes a shift to the Otherworld.
Thanks, Mom!
Precisely!
Thankfully, Deputy Wheeler shows up and the two make plans to find Elle, preferably before...
I was about to go to Looney Tunes in this Roach Motel.
It's here where Alex and Wheeler find Judge Holloway about to be gassed, where she reveals that Elle's locker belonged to her younger sister, Nora. However, a genuine moment of tension happens as Wheeler is taken by our next boss fight, and for the first time in this game, I am legitimately invested in the character's safety. Making matters worse is the fact that Alex now has to fight off against the human centipede. Although actually, upon closer inspection, it looks kinda like that failed genetic experiment from that DNA episode of Red Dwarf.
Alright, Crichton, you don't have to make me sound like a complete cowardly gimboid git. I'm fine now. So, shall I cancel the order to find your mother?
With Nora's phantom defeated, Alex escapes to the outside, and it has to be what is by far the game's best looking bit of scenery, as our final destination lays forth in the church, just like the Silent Hill movie. While there, Alex stumbles upon a confessional booth, and inside he finds someone confessing their sins.
Forgive me, Father, for I have drastically sinned! An incredible range of trespasses! Mortal sins, venial sins, eternal sins! There's no act of depravity I'll turn away! How many Hail Marys should I do? Make me an offer!
And I think all of us who played Silent Hill 3 for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC, even though I don't think it was released for the original Xbox, but it was for the 360, I think we all know where this is headed. Also on PS3 for that terrible HD collection.
Without willing to mince words here, this is Adam Shepard, and it seems he's feeling remorseful for the way he treated Alex.
What could you have done that was so terrible?
I took my role as a father and I turned it into a daily chore. Fed him, cleaned him, put him to bed. I treated the dog with more respect. And when I was given a second son, the first might as well have been a stranger sleeping in our house.
You might think that this makes Adam into a redeemable character, but no.
But now do you feel like what you did was wrong?
I knew that it was wrong, but I pretended I didn't have a choice.
Then how can you ask me to forgive you when all that time you could have fixed things?
Because I'm scared of what's to come when time runs out.
Oh, is that how you see it? Well, don't worry, Adam. God will make sure you find forgiveness. In hell!
Words cannot describe how utterly fucking aggravating this is, especially when the only reason why Adam did what he did was because he was scared. An understandable reaction, mind you, but at the same time, this isn't some fucking stranger you're talking about, this is your son!
There is a reason for this, but as you can tell by my irritation, the reasoning is very stupid, and on a personal level...
With Alex telling his dear old dad to take a fucking hike after all the shit he put him through, we leave Adam for his sins. Meanwhile, Alex keeps on going until he finds himself face to face with the man himself, who brings up a little something interesting about Alex's past.
After all I've done, you still wear my old dog tags. That must mean something.
What are you talking about? These are mine. I'm a soldier. Just like you wanted.
Alex, you've been in the hospital.
I know. I was wounded in battle.
No. A mental hospital. You've been there ever since the accident.
Unfortunately, before we could get a legitimately heartfelt character moment dealing with revelations and emotional turmoil, Pyramid Head shows up to execute Adam, give Alex a nice hello, and walk away now that his check for his cameo is cleared.
I don't know what Silent Hill Homecoming's allergy to letting character moments breathe is, but what little pathos is trying to be set up is constantly being undercut because of its brevity.
This scene right here between Adam and Alex, we all know about how strained the relationship was, and we're aware that Alex always thought himself a failure in his father's eyes, and wanted to make his old man proud by being a soldier just like him. Combine that with the reveal that Alex was in a mental ward and his entire backstory as a soldier has been an absolute lie, this could have been a legitimately interesting moment to see these two either make peace with each other, or have Alex coldly leave his old man to his fate. But alas, the plot needs to be put on hold until it's dramatically relevant, hence Pyramid Head here to prolong the mystery way past its breaking point. And even in that case, with the reveal of Alex's life as a soldier being debunked, it also eliminates the one interesting factor about his character going into the game, and to that effect, the entire selling point of Homecoming's gameplay being more combat focused. And as I alluded to in the gameplay segment, a soldier traumatized by war would be a fascinating psychological concept to explore in a Silent Hill game, but sadly, Homecoming completely fumbles a ball in that aspect.
As for what we're given in its place, well, prepare for some massive bullshit.
Disguised as one of the cult members, Alex meets Curtis, a character we meet earlier in the game and didn't really have any relevance up until now, who's just standing in the elevator and surprise surprise, he sees through Alex's disguise and knocks him out. Awakening in the underground in a very Saw-inspired bunker setting, Judge Holloway and Curtis have Alex taken hostage, and it's here where our plot revelations begin to unfold as we see exactly what all of this was leading up to.
I want you to watch this in full just so you can feel my palpable anger.
Family is the most important thing, Alex. I would do anything to protect them. That's why I sacrificed my daughter.
What?
The Founders. They had good intentions. They left the Order to start a new life in Shepherd's Glen, where they feared the wrath of our God. So they made a pact to keep us safe. All that was required was a small sacrifice. Our children. Once every 50 years, the founding families must make an offering to appease the god. One of our children, our own flesh and blood, struck down by our own hands. I did what was required. I watched the light fade from Norma's eyes as I took her life, knowing her death would protect our family, protect Shepherd's Glen. No, Alex. One of us failed. Lacked the strength to fulfill his duty. Your father.
Where's Joshua?
Don't you see? Because of him, our sacrifices were in vain. The pact with our God was broken. Your father's lack of conviction cursed us all. Your hope was to revive the Order, which our founders abandoned. The true faith.
Well, let us dissect, shall we?
First and foremost, the history of Shepherd's Glen. The town's founders wanted to break away from the cult and start a new life without being forced to believe as they do. And the cult, you know, people who generally wanted to spend their time bringing God onto the earth so they could live in paradise, waste their resources on 4 insignificant people who, from the sounds of things, held no actual importance in their membership? Why? There's literally no fucking reason for them to do that. I know there were 4 defectors, but aside from being unfaithful, why should the cult care? Most of their members more oftentimes came from orphanages, or Silent Hill itself being insular enough so that back in their day they probably wouldn't have suffered too big of a loss from their departure anyway. Yeah, they state in the game that it's to appease God or whatever, but God wasn't looking for a sacrifice, it just needed somebody with the powers capable of letting her be born into our world, as is the case of Alessa, or something to be manifested through, such as Room 302 in Silent Hill 4. By comparison, what the hell do the children of Shepherd's Glen really do for God or the cult itself? And on top of all of this, why the blithering buttfuck did the town's founders agree to all this? I mean, what was the conversation going like this? Make a sacrifice to our God! Well, that makes absolutely no sense, but okay, I'll comply. It's just mind-boggling to me that the town's founders would piss their pants in fear and go along with this, especially since that this was the exact same thing that they were running away from. Which, to that effect, if they had no real problem with this, then why leave Silent Hill to begin with? I mean, I can't feel sympathy for any of these child murderers because while some feel remorse for their actions, they could have stopped this at any time. Especially since, considering by 1976, when they were more focused on birthing the town's god through Alessa than whatever the hell Shepherd's Glen was doing, they all knew exactly what they were doing and did nothing to stop any of this. And on top of all of that, when the cult was pretty much destroyed by the end of Silent Hill 3, they went through with it anyway because
But do you want to know what really takes the fucking piss? This line right here.
One of us failed. Lacked the strength to fulfill his duty. Your father. Your hope was to revive the Order, which our founders abandoned. The true faith.
dumbass.
So, in order to write around Silent Hill 3 ending the cult for good, they inserted this line to not only retroactively fuck over Silent Hill 3's good ending, but in turn completely fuck up everything that the story was trying to do. Sure, she preaches some empty platitudes and surface level bullshit about order and chaos, but I'm sorry, there was absolutely no build up to this, nor anything that previously suggested that she believed in the cult's teachings. Everything that ever happened to this game, save for one other stupid decision, is Holloway's fault. This right here broke the game for me in so many ways and pissed me off to the high heavens with such contrived plotting, a dull and tedious mystery, and the revelation of which, as you can see here, pretty much speaking for itself. And now, all of a sudden, Holloway decides to dial up the cartoon's supervillainy by sending Curtis to kill Elle for not believing in the cult's teachings, and after some censored gameplay in the Australian version, Alex murders Holloway, pretty much saying what we're all thinking at this point.
Precisely!
Saving Elle just in the nick of time and killing Curtis, Alex and Elle make tracks to find Deputy Wheeler in very bad shape.
Oh, by the way, a little word of advice, if you find anybody with a stab wound like this, don't remove the fucking object!
Bit of science for you, but as you'd expect, pulling out a knife will either possibly leave you cutting an artery or letting you bleed to death with injuries as deep as this. Anyway, after saving Wheeler, Elle stays behind to make sure he's okay, and Alex presses on alone to meet his fate. Inside the final chamber is where Alex learns the truth behind his existence, that he was the one meant to be the chosen sacrifice for the ritual, to the surprise of fucking nobody.
So, dear viewers, who's ready for some bullshit revelations? No, not that one, we've already reviewed it.
Why are we here, Alex? What's going on?
What's the matter? You scared?
Oh no, I'm cool. It's just... Dad never lets us out on the lake.
Not you, anyway. Dad thinks you're a little baby who can't do anything on his own.
Oh yeah? Then why'd he give me this?
What is that?
That's Dad's ring. But he told me not to show you, so I guess that makes me cooler.
Let me see it.
No!
What a piece of crap.
It's not. It's worth more than $1 million. That's why Dad gave it to me. Give that back! Give that back! Come on!
Oh no. Alex. You know, I almost had sympathy for you, I really did. And then you had to go and fuck it up right at the last minute.
Here's the thing, I know it makes sense for Alex to feel this way about Josh getting all the love and attention he never received, but the important thing to remember is build-up. And that's something that Silent Hill Homecoming never adequately portrayed. The conflict between Alex and Josh feels so forced here, especially when Josh here was provoked into showing him the ring, because Alex chose now of all times to be a colossal fucking dickhead. Something that feels completely out of character for him given how most of the game, he was a pretty cool older brother to Josh, in spite of everything that happened to him. Yeah, I'm well aware that siblings fight over the most trivial shit. Believe me, I know, being a brother myself, but my god, all of this started because of...
Yeah, give me the ring, it's mine.
No, you give me the ring. No, you. No, you. No, you. Oops. I'll admit, Alex wasn't a very compelling protagonist, but I at least had sympathy for his backstory, given that he was slated to be sacrificed and didn't deserve such treatment because he was a good guy despite all of that. But not anymore. That one scene where you can smell the bullshit writing on the wall just completely fucked over his character, and therefore my investment into what happens to him. And it's not even like Josh's death really saves the scene either, because the first impression we got of the kid was...
I want my toy.
When in all honesty, I think the game should have continued to build upon Josh being a frightened little kid in the scenes that the game otherwise showcased, such as the flashlight scene and scenes of him in the boat earlier on. At least this way, it would have helped preserve the tone of a Silent Hill game with the characters being scared, giving Alex more of a push to chase after Josh and save him from the monsters. Oh, and can I just point out this one little scene here?
Do you know what you've done?
It was an accident.
This is not the way it's supposed to be. I chose you. Now you've ruined it for all of us.
Yeah, never mind the fact that your son is dead, but your instinctive reaction is...
I chose you. Now you've ruined it did for all of us.
Anyway, one final boss fight later against the spider demon, and Alex lays the Shepherd family ring upon Josh's body, and in what should have been a very sweet scene, he also gives Josh the flashlight to help him deal with his nightmares as a token of apology. Arising out of the sewers and meeting Elle up on the streets, the two are about to embrace until suddenly aliens show up and abduct the two into their flying saucer, while Deputy Wheeler stumbles out claiming that he knew the Furon Empire was behind this all along.
Yeah, that's right, dudes and dudettes, you can get the UFO ending on your very first playthrough! What the fuck?
To clarify here, in previous Silent Hill games, you couldn't get the UFO ending on your first time through. It always was Next Fear exclusive. Mainly because you needed items like a channeling stone or some other requirements to unlock it, but in Silent Hill Homecoming, don't mercy kill Lillian, don't forgive Adam, but choose to save Deputy Wheeler, and boom! UFO ending. I mean, I can just imagine a newcomer's first playthrough if they enjoyed the game as far as it went, and then suddenly seeing this as their first ending to the game.
I have nothing more to say, but we do still have the other endings to cover, so fuck it, let's get it out of the way.
Going in order from least shit to the absolute worst, first we have the Bogeyman ending.
Honestly, if I were to pick a canon ending for the game, it'd be this one.
I mean, given what we know in the series in a similar vein to Leonard Wolf, having Alex return as judge, jury, and executioner of Shepherd's Glen, especially given his background as a sacrifice, makes all the sense in the world to me. As a soldier, he follows orders, with the innate desire to punish his parents for what they did to him, and Pyramid Head's appearance in the game makes perfect sense with Alex all too willing to do the deed as he's seen in the game. And like Leonard Wolf, I do eventually think that Alex himself would be transformed, and thus he lives on as Pyramid Head, there to stalk the town of Shepherd's Glen and walk for eternity looking for others to punish for their sins.
It's one of the few times where there's solid build-up, a reason for the character to walk this path, and on top of everything else, justify why Pyramid Head is here. That being said, this scene is just asking for this joke.
Presentation-wise, this could have been so much better than it was. In fact, arguably even Silent Hill Origins with its butcher ending did this a little bit better, but again, the whole shouting of no just makes it sillier than what was likely intended. The next ending is the good ending, which is basically Alex and Elle walking away from Silent Hill, and yeah, that's basically the anticlimax I expected from this piece of shit. Coming up next is a drowning ending where the ritual goes as planned. Adam drowns Alex in the bathtub with Josh still alive, thus rendering the game completely pointless.
You might think this is the worst ending to the game, but oh no, we have saved the best for last.
The final ending sees Alex back in the hospital, where it turns out it was just batshit bonkers the entire time. Ending it all with a fan-wanky theory bullshit of, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if insert series here was all just a dream, and an insert character here got carted off to a mental asylum for dreaming up the whole series?
And that, dudes and dudettes, was Silent Hill Homecoming.
My god, do I even need to say anything else? This game fucking sucks, and Double Helix really screwed the pooch on this one. From a gameplay perspective, while Double Helix do a decent job of translating some aspects of the old design such as puzzles, exploration, and the atmosphere on occasion, but it comes at a cost because when the game is functional, it's boring, but when it sucks, it's infuriating, and on the whole, when you take the story into account, it just rubs more salt in the wound.
But despite my negativity, I do at least have a degree of respect for the developers of Double Helix games.
This wasn't a work-for-hire project, and there was some legitimate passion poured into this game, and it's clear that, unlike Christoph Gans with the Silent Hill movie, they did legitimately want to try to tell a story in this universe that pays respect to both the previous games, while being a new story in its own right. And at its absolute worst, this game mainly just fucks up its own plot, and thanks to its self-contained nature, can be safely disregarded in the grand scheme of the series.
However, and I hate to say this given how much I've already bitched about the game, but out of all the times for you to not screw up Silent Hill, this was the game that needed to succeed more than anything else.
Just to set the scene here, Silent Hill 4 did little to impress in terms of reception and sales, and I think this above all else was what made Konami decide to can Team Silent as the primary developers of Silent Hill, in spite of Silent Hill 5's interesting concepts. But Silent Hill Homecoming wasn't some late entry PS2 game that most notably glossed over, and nor was it some throwaway tide the fans over game like Silent Hill Origins was. This was meant to be Silent Hill's big reinvention. If you were to ask me what was the game that killed the Silent Hill series, it wasn't Silent Hill 4, it wasn't Shattered Memories, and it certainly wasn't Downpour, it was this.
But here's the thing that really brings my piss to a fucking boil, is that for a brief few fleeting moments, Double Helix Games understood Silent Hill.
For all the positive moments I pointed out in this review, Double Helix Games had it in the ballpark and they knew that they could make a good Silent Hill game, but with a lack of understanding gameplay mechanics, story, characters and atmosphere, they fumbled the execution. There is a good Silent Hill game desperately struggling to breathe life here, but overall it's not enough to save Homecoming to any significant degree. This game sucks and it permanently damaged the series into the lifeless husk that it is as of right now, that Konami is desperately struggling to breathe back to life given the recent game announcements, but whether or not they succeed, only time will tell.
But if there is one positive I can say about this whole experience, I never have to play this game ever again. So, on that note, I'm Solidus-Skully. The Silent Hill Marathon finally continues once more as we journey to the freezing realms of Silent Hill's shattered memories. So, I'm Solidus-Skully, I'm free of Homecoming's influence, and if anybody asks me to do a commentary, I will hunt you down, and I will commit torturous experiments all over your fleshy bodies. Well, catch you dudes and dudettes next time. Have a sweet dream. Oh, by the way, for those of you wondering whether or not you're going to be seeing some sexy behind-the-scenes Skully penis action, sorry. Yep, I was wearing boxers the whole time. Now I'm going to come after you and give you a hug. Waddle, 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 waddle. Oh yeah, with the arms folded, you know I'm getting serious. Here's why! Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun! It's clear at this point that the members of the fucking shit cunt can't read script.
Here we go! Around 2000... still doesn't mean to go on.
The earlier parts of the game were at least somewhat able to atmosphere the ailing of the island sill.
Shock of all shocks, a monster called the Scraper shows up, and after dealing with it, Alex heads back out into the streets and finds his old childhood friend, Ellie. Wait, is it Ellie or Elle? Oh, fucking hell, goddammit, stupid fucking similar names that do shit.
It's clear at this point that the kids of the town founders are returning to enact their vengeance on their parents? Parents? Oh, laddie, if their parents have failed them, laddie.